You know, Arpin, usually I would be just like any other person and delve into a little bit of Schadenfreude and savor the misery of my enemy, or basically rejoice in somebody else's misfortunes, which is basically the definition of Schadenfreude. But looking at the Boston Bruins last night and how quickly they fell. I mean, the bottom fell from underneath them, and this was an unrecognizable opponent to the Canadiens yesterday. It's staggering how steep the fall has been.
I mean, that's probably how, I was watching that. I was imagining how David Pastrnak was feeling just alone on an island, just looking for friends and not finding any. I mean, Morgan Geekie's a promising young player, but like really not a whole lot to look forward to in that lineup. Obviously, Charlie McAvoy's hurt, and Nikita Zadorov, I think, is a fine defenseman when he has other better defensemen around him. But this is probably how Bruins fans looked at the Canadiens for years. I mean, last night was what, the second time the Canadiens have beaten the Bruins since November 5th, 2019. Juraj Slafkovsky after the game was wondering if he had ever beaten the Bruins. He has. It was on November 11th, 2023. Montreal beat Boston 3-2 in overtime at the Bell Center. Boston had won 5 straight since then, and that ended a streak of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 straight Boston wins. And the game last night ended a streak of, I suppose, 16 games without a regulation loss for the Bruins against the Canadiens since November 5th, 2019, when they lost 5-4 in Montreal to a vastly different version of this Canadiens team. But the Canadiens, since then, this is how Boston looked at the Canadiens. This was not a rivalry. Everyone talks about this rivalry. This rivalry in its history have gone through periods where it wasn't a rivalry. For the longest time, it was the Canadiens bullying the Bruins all the time, especially in the playoffs. But over the last 6 years, close to it, 5.5 years, the Bruins have just owned this quote unquote rivalry. It's for something to be a rivalry, both sides need to get their punches in.
Yeah.
Just getting beat up by someone doesn't make you a rival, And so the Canadiens were on the receiving end. They were the punching bag. It looks like the shoe's going to go on the other foot here. And what's unfortunate is that it's going to be the complete opposite in that, Boston and Montreal have not been competitive at the same time in a very long time. And that's too bad. And it looks like it's going to
2013, 14, 15, around those.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And it looks like that's going to continue. And while I'm sure a lot of Canadiens fans have no sympathy for the Bruins, and I'm not suggesting you should, it's just unfortunate that we have not had an NHL where the Canadiens and the Bruins are both relevant at the same time, where they can meet in the playoffs potentially. Like, I don't see this Boston team making the playoffs anytime soon. The Canadiens are looking likely to be starting a run where they will be a playoff team. Whether they can reach the contention stage of being a cup contender remains to be seen, but they're seemingly on that path. And, like 2 trucks on the highway going in opposite directions in the middle of the night, just passing by each other. That's kind of what we saw last night. I mean, the second period, there was one team on the ice in that second period. It was the Boston Bruins barely touched the puck. And I have not seen a Canadiens team do that to a Boston team in a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. But, kudos to the Canadiens. Maybe that perhaps that the rivalry or the image of the opponent last night helped motivate them for that game. But there's also there's been a lot of talk about like those trap games of trying to facing a lesser opponent who's playing loose and's got nothing to play for, but nothing, no, no really
Nothing to lose.
nothing to lose at the same time.
Yeah.
But the Canadians remain very focused in that game, and it's an important attribute to have at this point of the season because they're going to face Philadelphia, which served them a bit of that medicine in their previous tilt. Then
Mhm.
on Sunday, it's going to be a game in Nashville, who have been out of it the whole season. In a not too distant future, they're going to face Chicago. So right there, you got 3 more games against lesser opponents where you have that risk, so you better
Uh,
not let your guard down because those points, you can talk about ease of schedule or strength of schedule all you want, but if you're facing lesser opponents, you must not dumb down your play and bring your level down just to adapt to your opponents. So in that sense, the Canadians had a good formula going against the Bruins, but they've got to stick with it against Philadelphia in Nashville if they
I
want to make
mean,
sure that they want to secure their spot.
I think you could include the following game. I mean, by the time the Canadians face the Red Wings, if they take care of their business this weekend, the Red Wings will basically be out. I mean, if the
That's
Canadians,
yeah,
if the Canadians can have the weekend that they need to have, because obviously the Rangers and the Blue Jackets remain incredibly relevant to their playoff future. Um, if they do that, then the Red Wings will essentially be dead, and so they will also be a team. Probably not technically. I can't imagine they would be mathematically eliminated at that point, but for all intents and purposes, will could possibly be also eliminated at that point. So yeah. So if you add Detroit, then that's 4 of their final 7 games against teams that don't have a whole lot to play for.
yeah. What did you make? I mean, there was a lot of interesting storylines last night. Obviously, the Dvorak line is keeps going and keeps providing like a true second line production for the Canadians lately.
Mm-hmm.
But what did you make of another play that was right at the end when Jake Evans decided to not score the empty netter himself, and God knows that he could have taken it for his own statistics, and instead chose to pass um, to Nick Suzuki, who's now in a very real position of getting more than 82 points in the season and guaranteeing his point per game production for the season. Um, but yeah, what did you make of that selfless move?
Well, yeah, that's. I mean, well, it shows that Jake Evans is his head is in a good place, and he scored on March 1st against the Buffalo Sabres. That's the last time he scored. Before that, his previous goal came on January 21st. He scored the game-winning goal against the Lightning. So that's 1 goal since January 21st. It's a big chunk of time. It's like a quarter
Yeah,
of the season. Uh, he could have shot at that empty net, but there was a Bruins defender between him and the net. It wasn't 100% certain that he would be able to get it by that defender and put it in. And so he made the play that the team needed at the time, which was to send it over to Nick Suzuki, who had a wide open shot at that net to ice the game. And I feel like that's what the Canadians are getting from a lot of guys. They're getting what they need from them. We had a long conversation with Mike Matheson the other day after practice about his changing role, how he's accepted it, and how he's doing everything necessary to make the playoffs. He said he entered the season with 1 goal, had nothing to do with his points, nothing to do with anything. My goal was to make the playoffs. So whatever role I'm given, whatever I have to do, I need to do the best I can in that role to help the Canadians reach the playoffs. And I think there are a bunch of guys on this team that have that same mindset. And that's when you get to a pretty special place where your individual stuff takes a serious backseat to team achievement. Uh, and the Canadiens seem to have that. I mean, Josh Anderson was talking after the game about how, his line, and we've talked about it all season, really, how that line is just three guys with so much to prove, had a lot to prove. A lot of people had written them off. Um, and they've been doing it all season. Brendan Gallagher's at 19 goals. I don't know how many people thought he would ever be in the 20 goal range ever again. Here he is, a goal shy, batting his heart again after scoring last night, in memory of his late mother. Josh Anderson, who apparently he revealed last night that he is expecting his first child any day now. So also going through some pretty big life changing things. Had another excellent game and just continues to be that culture driver, that guy who plays that hard forechecking style that Marty St. Louis would like other people to emulate. He continues providing that example, and Christian Dvorak is just, again, I've seen people, commentators mentioning how they need to re-sign this guy and bring him back, and it's just like, one thing at a time. But right now he's at the very least, well, no, at the very least he's helping the Canadiens and providing what they need as a team. But individually he is providing himself with a good argument to get, probably a more interesting contract from whatever team he gets it from, than most people thought he would. He's
sure.
playing excellent hockey. And if the Canadiens can make the playoffs, his role is going to be vastly accentuated and magnified. The only real reliable left shot faceoff guy the Canadiens have, an extremely effective penalty killer, and now starting to show some offensive chops. And that line, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but like you think of that Stahl, Perry, Armia line in 21. This is obviously not as big of a line, but still probably could potentially provide the same type of hockey as that line provided the Canadiens back in 21. Just by watching them play now, they play that deep, heavy game. Puck possession in the offensive zone, they'll cycle forever. It doesn't always result in scoring chances, but the puck is oftentimes very far away from their own net when they're on the ice. I could see a world where those guys provide a similar role for the Canadiens in a playoff context should they get there. But more on a more macro kind of level, they're providing exactly what the Canadiens need, and they're getting that from a lot of guys. Because that is the mindset so many of these guys have, is that they don't care about their individual stuff. They have bought into the team concept. Whenever Martin St. Louis talks about a collective game, this is what we're seeing from the Canadiens right now.
Yeah, and when you mentioned Matheson in our conversation earlier this week, you can tell that he's really not ready to turn the page on him as an offensive defenseman. I think that he continues to consider himself and define himself as an offensive defenseman, or because of the tools that he's got at his disposal. But it's just parking that for the better of the team. And I know
he's still working on parking it, though. I don't think he parks it every night.
No. But he says that he does. He says that he does.
No, he doesn't exactly say that he does. I mean,
what I mean is that he says that he's forgetting his propensity for offense and tries to do every night what's being asked of him.
No. I think I need to clarify that, because I think part of that conversation happened before you arrived. But what we've been talking about, how he needs to apply the mindset he has in those tough matchup games all the time. The mindset he had against McKinnon, like that's how, I felt an obligation to present him with that, because I don't feel comfortable saying something about someone without saying it to their face. And so Wednesday at practice, that's how that conversation began, is I wanted to present that notion to him, and he disagreed with it. He did not he did not. I wouldn't say he disliked it, but he did not agree with that. He did not think that. He said, "I don't see myself as strictly shut down. I still
Yeah.
have. I need to make life difficult on those guys by playing in their end and making them defend." So this desire to be an offensive guy doesn't get completely parked, and it's not completely parked in his own mind, and he doesn't want to. Uh, he doesn't think that actually helps the team, and that's honestly his goal is to help the team. He's like, but if when I'm stuck in my own end all the time against these guys, yeah, maybe they don't score, but they're creating momentum or whatever. Like I could do more to make those players defend. Um, so he pushed back pretty hard
But
on being like
yeah,
a
because
shutdown defenseman.
but he didn't accept the premise that he plays his best defensive games against like the top opponents, or that there was a disparity, because
Yeah.
you could because there is, sometimes when he's got his huge opponents, big guys on the other side that he has to play like with a tight matchup, that's when he plays well defensively, and there are other games where it's just not there.
Well, it's not just defensively; it's just in terms of puck and game management and decision making, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's so last night. I wrote about this last night, but I mean, last night there was an instance in the third period. The Canes are up 3-0. Matson has the puck near the blue line. David Pastrnak is who Matson was glued to all night as a hard matchup because I mean, you shut down Pastrnak, you basically beat the Bruins right now. So um, he had the puck up near the offensive blue line, started skating towards the middle, and was looking for a way to get a shot through. And Pastrnak was on him, and ultimately decided to just chip the puck into the corner. And the Canadiens spent another 20 seconds in the offensive zone, and basically they avoided a turnover. Right, which and other points in that game, Matson did commit turnovers, and it's not like he played a perfect game, but that moment to me kind of epitomized what he's navigating right now. Like he could have disregarded the score, disregarded the time of the game, and disregarded the player that's closest to him, and decided that I'm going to try and make a difference offensively right now, and he didn't. So that to me was a sign that uh, he's evolving in that sense. And I asked him after the game about it, and he was like, and that's exactly what he said. But one thing he did say is that against Pastrnak, in particular, if you shoot the puck, he could be going right by you immediately. Like he thrives on that. Like block shots or shots that don't reach the target, and all of a sudden he's on a breakaway. So he had that in mind. So like those are the types of things I think that keep him focused when he's facing a specific matchup and he has a specific defensive mission that he has to accomplish. And but I thought it was interesting of him. He still does want, and he pointed out on his own. It's like it's not just the fact that I'm not on the first power play. I don't get offensive zone shifts as much. He didn't mention this, but the reality is that like last year he got first power play, a lot of ozone starts. No defenseman had more ozone starts than him last year, and no defenseman played more with Nick Suzuki than he did. This year, all those things apply to Lane Hudson. He's doing all those things, and so not so much the Suzuki thing. I think Matheson has still been Suzuki's most frequent sort of line mate with a for a defenseman, but of late, Hudson's minutes with Suzuki are starting to increase as well. So he's basically taken all those things away from Matheson, and Matheson's had to readjust how he views himself. But he's doing that for the good of the team. Like that's really something that I thought he was pretty eloquent with us, talking about, I have to do what the team needs from me, and I have to accept these things that would do me no good and would do no one any good to just pout and complain about it and worry about my points and all that stuff. Like really, um, he stood up for himself, but also showed that he's a team guy
He's a team
ultimately.
player. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you got other guys who are also more like specialists in the sense that they're more and more used in very specific situations. And a veteran like David Savard, who's a favorite target of a lot of fans,
Mm-hmm.
has seen his ice time reduced significantly. He's still the go-to guy on the PK, and he's going to be there to defend the lead at the end of a game. But otherwise, his 5-on-5 minutes have gone down a great deal, and
Third
he
period
recognized,
minutes, especially.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
he recognizes where he's at in his career. But he could also say, well, I've been playing more than that throughout my career, but he's got that opportunity again to see the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs. That's what he wanted in the first place when he signed here.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Patrick Laine is also a specialist, and you could say also that the type of work that he does is for the greater good. So there's when you say that there are many guys that it applies to, that's true.
Yeah, and I think Savard and Laine are interesting case studies, I guess, in the sense that, NHL teams used to often employ specialists, right? A guy that was primarily there to play most of the time on the power play. You didn't really, but there were guys who killed penalties, but you could play them 5-on-5 because they were reliable defensively. Savard's a little unique in that case, in that he's not all that reliable at 5-on-5, but since he blocks shots and doesn't have to really move on the penalty kill, it helps him. Laine is really, you know, it's not getting better, the 5-on-5 stuff. Like, it does, you have flashes of it where it's, he'll have a shift where he lays a couple of hits and, like, is protecting the puck well and is responsible with the puck. But more often than not, at 5-on-5, plays die on his stick a lot. Like, they wind up on the other team's stick not long after. But you have to have him in the lineup, and therefore you have to play him occasionally at 5-on-5, because he can be such a difference maker on the power play. And you, so
But he's part of that chocolate box. You never know what you're going to get.
he's the main chocolate in that box. Like, he is number one. I mean, it really, like, I think Newhook's effort, and you never know what you're going to get from him in the sense of finishing his chances, but of late
Mm.
he gets
Yeah,
chances.
yeah,
Like,
there's consistency.
he's pretty consistent there.
Yeah.
And like, but line is, I think, the main box of chocolates element of that line. So, but it is a unique situation where the Canadiens have two specialists in out of their 18 skaters. Um, and I think a lot of people would say, "Oh, Hudson's a specialist too," but he's not. Like, let's be honest, he's far from that. He plays a lot at 5-on-5 and is effective doing it. So it's interesting that they do have these two specialists, and they could make a difference in a playoff setting. Like, that's, and it would be interesting to see, like, Laine and Ovechkin are basically the two guys, the two most dangerous left circle shooters in the league, really. And Laine was asked about it. Simon Olivier Lorange was asking, and he wrote about it yesterday. Was kind of asking, like, why do you think that's, like, Hudson to Laine is still working? Like, the whole league sees what you're trying to do. How is it? And then Laine's response was like, well, Ovi scored 300 goals from that spot. Why don't you ask him why it's not working? Like, he still gets those shots off, and he just scored the other night, right from that spot. So, and he wasn't comparing himself to Ovechkin, obviously, but it's an apt comparison. Like, he operates in that same area of the ice, and he's dangerous every time he lets one go from there. And that's a key element for the Canadiens, and you have to live with the 5-on-5 stuff, to benefit from the kind of the special power play combination you have there.
Yeah. Another guy who's doing what needs to be done in his limitations is Michael Pezzetta. It meant for most of the season, it meant not playing.
Yeah.
But even in very limited minutes, I had this interesting talk with him on Wednesday, because I knew I was going to write about Oliver Kapanen, and for the time being, Marty has chosen to play Pezzetta over Joshua Roy,
Mm-hmm.
and you can tell. I mean, against the Bruins last night, even though it was only a handful of minutes, these were good minutes. That for Pezzetta, he played one of his best games of the season. It's a
Mm-hmm.
limited role. It benefits the coach in the sense that he's going to double shift some other guys here and there. So he might think that it's beneficial for the team, but even what he gets out of Pizzetta right now is good, but Pizzetta said, right now they don't need a fourth liner like myself to go out and do anything crazy. You just need to be reliable. You need to be able to play comfortable minutes. And I think we went out there in the last few games and matched the other team's second line. And he said, I'd love to go out there and try to do some stuff that kind of make me seen. But at the end of the day, we got to focus about the team and about making the playoffs. And that made me think of that play of Arbor Jacki the other night. It was against Carolina, where basically that 3-on-2, after being sparingly used during that game as a seventh defenseman, he wanted to go out there and show that he wanted to have a dominant Jacki shift, but in the process, lost his guy, did not do the check that he wanted to do on the puck carrier, and it turned into a 2-on-1, and they got scored on. So that was Jacki trying to be seen. And when Pizzetta, who's playing much, right, he's fighting for his NHL career. It's in limbo as it currently stands. He could see any opportunity that he gets, and it's like 6 or 7 shifts a game, as an opportunity to be seen and fight for his career, and trying to suck it up to a certain extent and just say, I'm going to just do stuff that helps the team and that doesn't help my own career. That's it in his own way. It's also just the selflessness that Marty was talking about, that was a key ingredient to the success of the team. While you see it all the way down to your 12th forward. So yeah, that's an interesting.
Well, I mean, I think it's worth discussing how long he's going to be the 12th forward. I can understand not playing Oliver Kapanen last night. He hasn't even had a practice. The Canadiens are not practicing today. Kapanen did have a morning skate yesterday. He's going to have a morning skate tomorrow prior to the game against Philly. I would think, if you wait to get him a practice, then I don't know when he would be able to play. Like, I don't foresee the Canadiens practicing for a while. They're probably not going to practice on Monday after coming off a back-to-back. I personally would like to see what Kapanen looks like in that spot. They're probably not going to practice until Wednesday, after the Red Wings game. Or if not then Thursday. Like, it's really, I think the Canes need to know what they have there. Because everything you said about Pez is true, and he has a great attitude. He doesn't really have a choice, frankly, to have that attitude, because he is what he is, and he's been the 13th, if not the 14th forward all season. He's happy to be in the lineup right now, and anything he can do to stay in the lineup is what he's going to do. That's natural. But Kapanen has shown himself, even prior to leaving and going to Timrå, showed himself to be a reliable player. Marty constantly talked about how responsible he thought he was. He's a shooter. He has offensive instincts. He was nearly a point per game player at Timrå. Was a top line center there. Doing that at age 21 is not common in the SHL, and definitely not this season. He was one of the better young players in the league, if not, the best young player in the league, and really was the most productive player under the age of 25 and points per game. I think he was second in points per game among 24 and under players in the SHL this season at age 21. I would be curious. And I think heading into the playoffs, and you want to give him some runway, right? You don't want to put him in for a game and be like, I don't like that. And you want to be able to identify if he's an option for you should you reach the playoffs. And I think he should be. Like, the reason why Pez goes in for Roy is that once Roy is taken off that second line, when Heineman gets moved up there,
he's got nowhere to go.
He's got nowhere to go. The Canadiens organization does not see him as a fourth line player and don't see him being effective in a fourth line role with fourth line line mates. Pez is a much better fit there than Roy. but Kapanen can play there. He has played there. We've seen him in that role. He can bring a little pop to that line, especially with the way Armia is incapacitated right now. I mean, again, last night it's he had a moment last night where he seemed to jam his wrist or whatever's bothering him on his left arm.
in the neutral zone where he's sort
No,
of.
no. Well, in the
Oh, that's
offensive zone,
another
I think,
time. Yeah.
yeah, in the
Okay.
offensive zone, he kind of got up from a battle and sort of was looking at his wrist and sort of skated to the bench and was kind of like, it just seems it's bothering him to the point where, what's the best thing about Armia? It's his ability to handle the puck in a phone booth and in tight quarters somehow manage to maneuver the puck around. It's his hands. His hands combined with his body is what makes him such an effective player, and he doesn't have his hands right now. Like they're just not there. And so adding someone with some hands on that line would probably help, I think, as well as Pizzetta played last night, and I agree with you. He did his job very well. I thought he had energy, and the fact that the Canadiens had a lead in the third period, like a comfortable one, allowed him to get some shifts in there, and that's great. But the Canadiens need to find out what they got in Kapanen, because I think they can use him in that spot, and I think it would help them.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would not expect like an offensive burst, even though he had a great season in the SHL, but they don't need that from him. All they
No.
need is a guy who's got a bit of an offensive flair to help that line spend more time in the offensive zone than they currently are. The
Mhm.
way that Eineman was doing that for them in the first half of the season. So the fact that he could take face-offs, the fact that he could be put on the second power play, although he was been used in Timra as a bumper and not
Yeah.
necessarily in the same spot that Armia is, but you could reshuffle things a little bit and or ask him
Well,
to play from
I
that
mean,
circle. But
Gallagher's in that spot right now. He could take his spot.
yeah, yeah. But I
Uh,
mean, the point would be to take a guy who cannot shoot right now off a shooting position on the power play,
yeah.
especially second unit of the power play. They see 30 seconds. Their focus will be direct attacks, not spending too much time to find the perfect play and
Mhm.
make too many passes. They're just going to go and say, how can we put pucks on the net in the short time that we've got at our disposal? So if you've got a shooting mentality, probably more than the first unit, you need guys who can shoot the puck, and Armia cannot right now. So yeah, I agree with you that this they need to see what they've got in him. But what I'm hesitating with is, do you think, even though he was there at the beginning of the season and saying we had some good words on Kapanen earlier in the year, the fact that he's dropped on he drops on the club like that so late in the game, that there might be with Marty a sort of mentality, a pack mentality that's established. Like, I've got my group, and they're in the trenches together, and then you got this guy who arrives, and Pizzetta is part of my pack, and I trust him. He's been in the trenches with us the whole year, and then now Kapanen arrives, and I've got to play this guy. I mean, I would not think like that, but I would just wonder if there's a chance that Marty might think like
He might, but I don't see a world in which he sees Pizzetta as part of his pack. Like he hasn't played most of the year. He's been most of the year he's been a scratch, and yes, he's playing lately. Um, Not even all that consistently, frankly. But I think why Marty cannot feel that way is, the conversation we had with Newhook about Kapanen, and him talking about how, he thinks the game really well, has a potential to be an elite player in this league, use the word elite.
that.
And when he said he thinks the game well, like I kind of asked him, like, why, what makes you say that? He's like, he's really easy to play with. And generally guys that are easy to play with think the game well. And if Kapanen has that kind of currency with his teammates, and we didn't do like a full survey of the whole room. I didn't talk to 10 guys about him, but to get that kind of an endorsement from like a relatively important player on the team, it's easier to do that than uh, than otherwise. Than if Kapanen were coming from Sweden and had not played with these guys before and didn't know them other than training camp. Uh, and again, like if Ken Hughes and Jeff Gordon had decided, okay, we're going to go get some help for the fourth line at the trade deadline, would Marty St. Louis have had that attitude about that player? Whoever they went out and got, like it's sometimes things change, and you have to put
Yeah.
out the best 18 guys that you can put. I think Marty understands that. He played the game. He knows what's acceptable to guys and what's not. And I don't think putting Kapanen in the lineup would be seen as unacceptable from the guys, and I think that's
Yeah.
what he's trying to prevent. Like he's trying to prevent a sense that you don't want to remove a guy who's been part of that pack, that the rest of the team will be like, wait a minute, that's not right. Like that's not right. That guy does not deserve that. And which, maybe some guys think that about Jacky right now, like who knows? But like you look at Struble play, I can't see anyone being that put off by the fact that Jacky has been taken out of the lineup because Struble deserves that spot with his play. He's deserved it. And no one's going to say that Savard should be out because he's so important in that room. And he would be a guy that if he got taken out, I think that they would have that reaction about him for sure.
But at
But
the same time, it goes back to the mentality of saying, enough with the individual preoccupations. Let's think about the team.
I think in Savard's case, the team views him as an important piece to the team, like to the team's ability to win because of his utility in those very specific situations on the penalty kill, putting his body on the line when the other team has their goalie pulled. He's out there, although he wasn't last night. Interestingly enough, even though Marty said yesterday morning that he's out there at the end of games, he was not out there when the Bruins pulled their goalie. Anyhow, um, but I don't think that applies to Kapanen. I think he has enough currency with these guys, and I think they can see that Pez is doing his best, and it would have been great last night if he'd gotten his first point of the season. He was so close. He was on the ice for a goal. Didn't happen. I was sad. I would have liked to have seen him get a point. I would have liked to have seen him get a point, but he has no points. He has 9 shots on goal this season. 9. It's you need something.
He hit the net 9 times.
9 times right out of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like he's the same number of days Ferris Bueller missed at school is the number of times Michael Pezzetta hit the net with a shot this season. And you need more than that. Even though it's a fourth line winger spot, you need more than that out of that spot. And I'm not saying, and you know what? Maybe Kapanen won't be able to provide that, but you better find out before it really matters. And the Canadiens have a little bit of runway here to find that out. And I think it would behoove them to do that.
Yeah, and I think that for all the extra shifts that are given to other guys not named Michael Pezzetta, I think that they would be wise also to try to hold back on that as much as they can, and so that they can. I understand that they're fighting for their playoff spot, and it's like those are crucial games, and maybe that it's not time to be too calculated about that. But still, I mean, we've seen Suzuki's ice time go up in the recent stretch of 15-20 games. A lot of 22-minute games lately. I think that if they could have a fourth line that is able to get you a couple minutes more, it'd be useful, especially from just your 12 forward. So in that sense, I think that Kapanen would provide you that more than Pezzetta can. And speaking of runway, if
Well,
the
wait a minute.
Canadiens,
Just
yeah,
before we move on from that, though, the other possibility here is that you keep Pezzetta in the lineup and you put Kapanen in and you take Armia out and let him heal. Like,
Well, that's it. That's
yeah.
that's where I was going with this.
Oh,
If they,
sorry. Okay, I thought you were changing
yeah,
the subject, but yeah, that's
no,
I
no,
think
no,
that
no, no.
watching them
It's
last
because of the
night, like it's
runway.
yeah.
The Canadians, like right now, it's definitely too close to call, right? But if in the last 2 or 3 games of the season, if they're if they got a little bit of a cushion, then they could probably afford to rest Armia
Hmm.
and put Pizzetta back in there and let Armia heal for the playoffs. Right now, they must think, heck, he's one of our top 4 guys on the PK. We need him, even if he's currently a specialist, also. But his role, even when diminished, is too crucial because you take him out of the
Yeah.
lineup. Who are you going to put as your regular PK guy? It's going to be more minutes for Suzuki,
Yeah,
obviously.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's a little bit tricky, but if they manage to win a few more games in that against those weaker opponents, then it opens up the possibility of resting Armia and making sure that you can have it closer to 100% when the playoffs start. Can't
Yeah, and
believe I'm
Marty
saying that.
no, I know it's crazy. And Marty was asked about the possibility of taking Armia out prior to the game on Tuesday against Florida. I think entering that game, he had attempted something like 7 shots in his previous 9 games. It's like he can't handle the puck. He literally not only is shooting, his passing, puck battles, anything that involves him putting his stick on the puck is laborious right now. It's painful. It's clearly painful. He can't do it. And so, but when Marty was asked this by our colleague Guillaume Lefrançois La Presse, and Guillaume sort of
No, that
asked
was
him,
from Gasker. That came from Gasker. Was it?
no, it came
No, no,
from
no. That
Guillaume.
was that was yeah, that was La Francois.
Yeah.
You're right.
He he said, like, where do you draw the line? And Marty's answer was, I don't have a line to draw there. Like, he might not be able to do all the things that he normally does, but he's rarely out of position. He's rarely not where he's supposed to be. And that right now is more important than, well, essentially what Marty was saying, and he didn't literally say this, but like in that circumstance on Tuesday morning, he's like, I'd rather have Armia with one arm than Roy with 2 arms. It's
Yeah, yeah,
basically that's what it came down to. And it remains that. And up until the point the Canadians can comfortably, like, if they have games left on the schedule, as you said, and a playoff spot is no longer in doubt, I don't even know if they necessarily need to have clinched, but if they give themselves some margin for error, yeah, I think you would ideally have a Yoel Armia who's closer to some semblance of 100%, whether that's 80%. Like right now, he's probably at 60%. Like it's if that. If you
yeah,
can get him somewhere around 80, that would help. And so, and especially, I mean, if you're going up against a team like Washington, which if the Canadians get in, that's basically who they're going to be playing. Uh, you're looking at a team that what that they're 22.2% on the power play. It's not exactly they're not exactly killers, um, but still having your one of your top penalty killers be able to, like, he can't even clear pucks on the penalty kill. Like, he has trouble
yeah.
icing the puck. Like it's tough. It's tough to watch, and like and good on him. Like, he's playing through something quite painful, and he's doing it. He's gritting his teeth and doing it, just like Anderson was doing for weeks. Again, doing what the team needs of you, despite what you might be going through on a personal level. Army is doing that, but they could use, if they get in, they could use an Armia that's a little healthier because he's an effective player when he's healthy. He's just not. He's not all that effective right now.
I think that the Armia's only shot on goal in the past 5 games has been a clear on the PK from 170 foot that landed in front of Sergei Bobrovsky.
No, it was in front of Binnington. It was the Canadians' first shot on goal in St. Louis that took them forever to get.
Right.
St. Louis got out to like a 12, 13. I don't even remember what it was, but the Canadians didn't get a shot on goal and they got credited with one there. It literally trickled to Binnington.
Mm-hmm.
As again, Armia was shooting it from his own blue line. So by the time it got to Binnington, it had like no steam, and it was basically like I was watching that. I was like, "That's not a shot on goal." Like I was watching it in real time, and I'm like,
Yeah.
there's no way they can give him a shot on goal for that," but they did. So that was Armia's shot on goal,
So that's 6 games ago. Okay.
and that
That's
was like
ahead of.
that was like a curling shot. That was like a draw. That was draw weight. Like it was basically basically like basically
Uh,
barely reached the net. Like
yeah.
like to call that a shot on goal was laughable, but they did. So
Yeah. Good on you for fact checking me a few times today. Thank you. That's good. I'm being corrected. Listen, do we speaking of kids, because we talked about Kapanen, but there's the kid Jacob Fowler who just signed
yes,
officially. It was announced this morning. It had it was circulating for the last couple of days.
yeah. Props to Jimmy
Um,
Murphy for breaking that. He had that first last night,
yeah,
so good
yeah,
for him.
absolutely. It's I think it's the best situation for both.
Yeah.
Uh, he's going to be able to probably take some games from Connor Hughes down the stretch, play some games with the Laval Rocket with his entry level starting next season. It's good for the Canadiens. As I argued in our Monday episode with you, I think that it can be good for the goalie too, because having 3 years to showcase yourself and prove that you're deserving of a interesting second contract. As a goalie, you can do that probably more easily in 3 years than in two, because
Hmm.
otherwise it comes very quickly. Devin Levi could say something to that effect. So I think it's great. To me, it would not have been the end of the world had he gone back to Boston College. People
No.
say, "Oh, he's got nothing to prove over there," and I'm like, he's been dominant. That's true, but the one thing that he would have had left to prove is that BC is not likely to be the same strength next season, as good a team. Had he showcased that he can carry the team on his shoulders, that
Hmm.
would have been something he could have proven at the college level. But I think it's exciting times for everybody to see him wear a Rocket uniform this spring, and most likely next season too.
Well, yeah, for sure next season too. But
Yeah,
it's what's going to be interesting here. You know, we were talking about when do you take Army out? When are the Canadians going to be comfortable? You know, the Rocket. Uh, the Rocket have a 5 point lead in their division with 7 games left to play on Rochester. They play in Rochester. When they come back they have 2 games against Abbotsford coming up. They're going to come back. They're going to practice on Wednesday, which is going to be Jacob Fowler's first practice with the team. He's going to speak to the media at that time and not before then for some reason. Um, and it's um, but then their
they've
next
got their own
game.
rules.
Anyhow. We don't need to get into that. Anyhow, they have their reasons. Their next game after that is Friday in Rochester, and so if Laval wins that game, um, they will have that's a 4 point game. Obviously, more so for Rochester than for Laval, but they could conceivably by then, depending on how they do against Abbotsford, that could basically clinch the division. And if that happens, then they have uh, 4 games after that. They play in Syracuse the next day on Saturday, April 12th. They have 2 home games against Belleville on April 16th and 18th, and they finish the season in Belleville on April 19th, Saturday. So that's a back to back. That game in Syracuse is a back to back. There's a world in which that could be Jacob Fowler's first game. Um, the game on April 12th. If things fall into place where that Rochester game, if Laval were to beat Rochester and basically clinch the division as a result, maybe we would see. And no, I think to be clear, like clinching the division would also essentially clinch first overall in the league, right? Like Rochester is the closest team to them in the
Yeah,
AHL. So Hershey's right there. They're actually 7 points behind Laval right now. Rochester's 5 points behind Laval. And out west, the Colorado Eagles are 6 points behind Laval. So they have a good cushion. But by the time that Rochester game happens, and assuming they win, then they could have locked up first overall in the league and really would be tuning up for the playoffs, and you'd have a decent runway. What's interesting to me is, so assuming Fowler were to get into one or two of those final four games, let's say he's like lights out. Let's say he's just dominant and like makes like 35 saves and shuts out Syracuse and gives up a goal against Belleville and is just like completely bonkers good. What do you do then? Because everything we talked about with Kapanen applies way more to Fowler in Laval. Is
Yeah.
really a situation that could be delicate. I'm sure organizationally the club would love to see what Fowler can do in a playoff setting. I'm sure it would be of great value information wise. And if he comes in and is outstanding, is that even a conversation you can have? Because I don't think the group in Laval would be all that receptive to it, especially like, everything Primo went through early in the season and him turning it around and becoming the goalie that he's become this season in the AHL. Like, for him to lose the net to a kid who just showed up at the end of the season, that would be tough. But
Yeah.
this is a philosophical dilemma that doesn't exist yet, but Fowler could make it exist. The potential is there. It's possible. It's an interesting kind of thought exercise.
So when I knew that I started covering the Canadiens, not my first days covering the team, but when I started for real, that first week, I saw the eyes of Martin Gerber looking freaked out by the way he was playing and how things were not going his way for the Carolina Hurricanes.
Right.
We
Yeah.
know the history there.
Mhm.
The Canadiens won the first two games. There was a goalie switch. They brought in Cam Ward, and the rest is history for the Carolina Hurricanes. To me, in this story, Primo can be Gerber in the sense that he's the veteran between the two. And I think that you enter the playoffs with the guy that brought you there, but you're ready for a quick hook. If things falter quickly, you turn to the kid and you say, "Show us what you got."
Right.
That's how I would approach it.
Right.
Because I think that Primo, the way that he's played down there, has deserved. I mean, they're first in the league.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like, move away. We've got this new shiny toy there. But if things would go astray, then you turn to your kid and who's got an interesting pedigree, who could very well turn things around.
Mhm.
Again, you have to see what he's got during those final few regular season games. But to me, he's more like the Cam Ward option
Right.
at the Rockets' disposal. That's how I see it.
Right. And I think it's important to note that's only the case if Fowler is exceptional in whatever games he gets in the regular season. Like, I don't think he necessarily jumps ahead of Connor Hughes if he's not outstanding or at least exceptional in whatever games he gets. And honestly, I have no reason to think he'll be bad. I don't think he will. Um, but he will need to show some level of potential, like some possibility that he could be that Cam Ward option in whatever number of games he gets down the stretch in the regular season. But it's interesting that he's going to get that opportunity. It's interesting that he didn't burn the first year of his entry level contract. He could have stuck to that if he really, really wanted to and made this really complicated. I think he smartly, as you mentioned, decided not to do that. And so I think that's a win-win for the organization, for the kid himself. And it gives added juice to what's going on in Laval, which had some juice taken out of it when David Reinbacher didn't make this trip out west with a mystery injury that no one seems to want to talk about. Not good. So Jacob Fowler arriving adds some shine to what's sort of an ominous situation with David Reinbacher. It's no one really seems to know what to make of that because it could be another injury altogether. It might have nothing to do with the knee, but no one really knows. So
Yeah.
but
So he
the
could.
last game he did play, he was dominant.
Yeah. So Fowler could play a game in Laval on the 16th or on the 18th. 16th is the last game of the regular season for the Canadiens. They host the Carolina Hurricanes on that day.
Right.
So anyway, it's going to be intriguing. Quick Future Friday, maybe.
Let's do a quick Future Friday. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. All right.
Future Friday. Okay, so for Future Friday this week, speaking of Laval, Sean Farrell continues
We
again.
talked about him recently.
We did. He's on a 3-game goal streak right now. Has 4 points in his last 3 games. Basically, since February 1st, the guy has been just an offensive wrecking ball. Just ridiculous. So, the Panthers were in town on Tuesday, as everybody knows. And so I do this sometimes, like whenever there are players on the other team that have come up through the sort of the US program, I'll quickly punch their name into elite prospects. I should do this in advance, but I don't. But I did. So I did it in the room in Florida because Mackie Samoskevich is there. He took some time, but he's arrived. He's a player for the Florida Panthers. He's an effective offensive player for them. And I was kind of wondering, has he crossed paths with Hudson or Caulfield or someone that's come up through the US program? And turns out that he has actually crossed paths with Farrell. They were both played for the Chicago Steel together. So I decided to go and ask him about him. And to my surprise, not knowing anything, turns out that Farrell was Samoschewicz's best friend. They lived together second year in Chicago. And he was just glowing when talking about Sean Farrell. They were really tight friends. Say he's a funny guy. He's quiet at first, but once you get him out of his shell, he's one of the funnier guys out there. But the one thing that he said that I found super interesting, so I'm just going to read you the quote because it's. So I said, despite all the things that you said, he's a really hard worker. He even worked hard in school. Obviously graduated from Harvard in 3 years. His work ethic is off the charts. So I was like, okay, so based on it, despite that, because of his size, he was drafted late and is having to work his way up to the NHL. It's if you had to make an argument as to why Sean Farrell is going to make it to the NHL, what would you say? And he said, and there's a quote, just the way he thinks the game. He's obviously a smaller guy, and once you're that size, you have to have something else that's really good, whether that's your hands, your shot, or your speed. And I think he's got it all. The way he thinks the game, when I was playing with him, it was one of those things where he didn't see you, but you knew in his head that he saw you. It was crazy. He's got eyes in the back of his head, so smart. So I'm sitting there and I was like, what did you just say? What? It's one of those things where he didn't see you, but you knew in his head that he saw you. And I was like, you're going to have to run that by me again because I don't really understand what you just said. So I was just kind of like, what? And he kind of giggled. He's like, yeah, no, I understand. He's like, it's hard to explain, but so he was like, he'll be coming down the wall. And usually a guy looks at you and then passes it. He doesn't seem to see you, but when you're away from the puck, you just know. It's a weird feeling. You're ready. It's fun to play with, and I definitely had lots of fun playing with him. So it's just this innate sense that no matter the situation, you have the feeling as his line mate that he knows where you are, whether he looked at you or not. And he said that just all the time, whenever I was on the ice with him and they played together, I just constantly had to be ready because he would find me and he would find me in situations where there was no conceivable way that he could have seen me. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, and then he finished he definitely deserves it. I'm rooting for him. And so, they're not that tight anymore. They're not really fully they talk to each other every now and then, but it didn't sound like they were super tight still. But I thought that was interesting insight into Farrell. I'd never heard a player describe another player that way. So I thought that was a unique thing for him to bring up that you just have this sense of his sense, and you had to operate based on this knowledge that he knows where you are at all times. And I thought that's a super good trait to have as a hockey player.
Yeah. So Nick Bobroff, when he drafted Lane Hudson, said that he talked about his big brain. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it more and more we realize that it's also Sean Farrell's main asset, his big brain. Whether or not he's able to bring that to the NHL, that remains to be seen. But he's got a late push this season that's a little bit the equivalent to Dvorak in Montreal, where that late push is reestablishing, the varnish of his own profile and his own career at
Mm.
very different stages and at different levels, obviously. But let's see where it takes him. But for now, he's doing great with Laval. I know that you got to go, Arpin, so we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah.
And well, everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Monday for our subscribers episode. So in the meantime, we'll enjoy the two games that the Canadiens are going to play this weekend. They're going to be fun ones, I'm sure. So see you around, everybody.